Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 5G talk. I think the only 5G talk in the conference. Um, I think after the question of why Katappa killed Bahubali, I think one of the most Googled questions is that what is 5G? And not just on the internet, but politically, there is quite a lot of curiosity. What is 5G, and basically, how does attacks looks like in the next, let's say, 10 years? Because fifth generation networks will be until like 2030. So in this talk, I will actually expose a new era of attacks in telecom networks and also show that why attacks in 5G are much easier to do compared to what was achieved in the last, let's say, in the last 2G, 3G, 4G networks. But before that, I want to give you a glimpse of what attacks actually looks like in mobile networks. So there can be attacks over the radio access network, which is over the air. They exploit maybe lack of authentication, and there are other security protocols that could be exploited. Then maybe you heard of SS7 or diameter attacks, which is the interconnection between different operators. Maybe you also heard of SIM attacks that exploit some type of browsers inside the SIM card, or SMS spam attacks, other backdoors that usually exist in network equipment, which is nothing but like black boxes so far. But if you look at all these attacks, they are pretty much like user-targeted attacks. So which means they try to gather information from a specific user or a bunch of users, or they like to track and intercept calls of a bunch of users. Or maybe they try to do some kind of fraud and exploit billing mechanisms inside mobile networks. This was the case until now, and then maybe 5G will definitely change the way attacks usually happen, because 5G is not the next technology that is used for you to just talk over the phones, but it's more like a technology that's coming to connect industries or like connect infrastructure, such as autonomous vehicles or your IoT infrastructure, your clouds. Basically, everything can be plugged into mobile networks, and they can be controlled like remote pretty much basically everywhere. Or even like health infrastructure. It doesn't have to be like simple devices, but it could also connect critical infrastructures, or even governments will definitely depend on 5G networks, because you could build a complete private 5G networks. And in this case, like if you look at the threat is more towards the industries, or like the threat is enormous compared to what it was, because the attacks were user targeted in the past networks. You might, because people are curious, like, okay, why is this? Why is it talking that, like, attacks could be much easier in 5G networks compared to what it was previously? So if you look at how protocols actually evolved from 2G, 3G, 4G, if you look, there are if you look at the MAP protocols or SS7 protocols, diameter protocols, these are pretty much not really understandable by a simple internet user. So these are pretty much, you have to be inside the telecom, and then like you understand the complexity of these protocols was pretty high. But now with 5G, they are moving to APIs. So all the internals of the core network, or you bring any other components into the mobile network, they will be pretty much connected using APIs. The APIs that I think pretty much everybody in this room is aware of. It's based on the HTTP2 protocols. They could be REST APIs or any other type of APIs, but it's pretty much moving to an internet-based architecture rather than some kind of traditional proprietary closed architectures. So I think that's one of the reasons like why attacks will be much more attractive or easier to perform compared to what it was previously, because you don't need any kind of like heavy infrastructure that we always use, such as like software-defined radios or maybe any other RF equipment that was used so far. But now this will definitely be a game changer by having APIs in the network, and how careful the operators or anyone using a 5G network should be careful in setting up their private networks, or like 5G networks, let's say. So this is just a simple example of a 5G core network. As you see, you have a mobile device, then you have a base station, and the rest of it is the core network. So what I'm telling is like all these interfaces are now replaced to use APIs. So that makes it more attractive for anyone who wants to look into security, let's say. You don't really need to learn something extra to hack a 5G network, let's say. Before I actually show you one part of the 5G network that we actually exploited, we try to find many vulnerabilities inside the APIs, or like how the networks are configured. I would like to give you a little bit introduction about like what is this new interface and how does it look like and how somebody can actually get access to that. So here is a general mobile network. As you see, there are devices on the left side. Then you have base stations, which are connected to the core network. And usual interfaces like SS7 diameter, or like these are the interfaces that connect between operators. Then you have the data network interface through which your mobile devices access internet. And now there is this new door, or like you can also call like a new interface, which is a standardized interface. It's called a network exposure interface. And this door actually opens to vertical industries or third parties, or you could also open it to cloud providers. You name the company. So basically everybody, when I say everybody, it means like companies or like organizations that want to connect or integrate their infrastructure with the mobile network can actually access this exposure interface. So going a little bit more detail into this interface. So as you see, like let's take different industries like smart factories or smartphones or smart homes, or you take any other industry. So their devices are connected to the radio access network, like the base stations. And we see there is an MNO, which is a network provider, like a network operator, who holds this whole 4G, 5G core network, and then exposes certain APIs, and then we call them technically like northbound APIs. And they are, I mean, they could be directly provided to the vertical industries or third parties, or in between there could be an intermediate. You can call it like a provider, or you can call it a virtual operator, or an IoT service provider, or a platform provider. Like you can call it in different ways, who actually take these northbound APIs and then convert them to something like service APIs. And then these service APIs could be tailored to specific industry. Let's say you are providing service APIs to smart factories. So the APIs will be different compared to what you provide to a smart hospital. So these APIs will now be exposed to the applications domain, where third parties or like industries can access these APIs and then now integrate their applications into that. So I give you one example here. Let's talk about drone. So this is a picture from Vodafone's 5G mobility lab in Germany. So you see this network exposure layer here in the middle, and which is connected to the core network, and the drone is nothing but one of your, let's say, mobile devices. Now, I mean, you might have seen drones being controlled with Wi-Fi or maybe any other low power technology like local area networks, but now it's more you want to connect them to the mobile network so that you can control the drone basically from anywhere. Like you can sit in another country and then you can have access to these APIs, and then these APIs will allow you to control your drone, because your drone is now connected to the mobile network, and that is basically reachable from anywhere. Maybe the same use case I can also explain in a different way, like for example, maybe with DHL as well, like the DHL trucks, how they operate these days. Maybe you have continuous updates when you buy something on Amazon. Maybe you are receiving that the truck is, let's say, 7 blocks away from delivering you. So this level of real-time updates are actually possible by having access to these kind of APIs. So just to summarize this one, like it's more, the future in telecom is nothing but like pretty much with APIs. And then this is just the tip of the iceberg that I'm showing, like it's a new interface that I'm showing. But if you look more detail into the core network, it's completely filled with a lot of APIs. So it's pure API research. If you are confusing with some of the API attacks that happened in the past, these are different from what the API attacks I'm talking now, because those API attacks in the past are basically some web interfaces that are supposed not to be exposed on the internet. But these interfaces that I'm talking now are something standardized and are particularly open on purpose so that industries can be integrated with mobile networks. So there is a big difference in that. And then this talk, I will give you starting with how do we commercially get access to this network exposure or the APIs, service APIs that I was talking about, and then what features or configurations it has, and then what are our security investigations in that, what did we do, what API vulnerabilities we found, and then how did our responsible disclosure go, and some key takeaways from that. So just the same picture from the previous slides, but a little bit more elaborated, like how does it look in a commercial environment. So on the left side, you have additionally an IoT SIM card. So this is a specific SIM card that you get when you subscribe to something called a network exposure or the API services. So you get this SIM card and then you insert into all your devices, and they can be now connected to the mobile network. So And now the key part here is the one in the blue area, which is called an IoT service platform. So I would be more focusing on IoT type of, let's say, services. I mean, you could, basically everything is IoT, like if you want to be very generic. But as you see here now, going a bit detail into this picture, so there's something called service APIs, which you saw before, and additionally there is something called IoT connectivity management platform. So this is nothing but like a web interface that third parties actually get, so that they can, let's say, configure their SIM cards or like have much more control in to control their SIM cards. So let me just go here. So how does this getting access start? So first of all, you have to buy the SIM cards. So these are, like I said, not similar to like the SIM cards that we use in smartphones, so they are pretty much different. So they just have, let's say, some MB of data. I mean, depending on the use case of IoT, maybe some SMS, and then it has a 10-year lifetime, roaming free, and it just costs, let's say, $10 depending on where you buy it. It pretty much connects to 4G or any other networks beyond that, let's say 5G as well. And like, I don't know if you follow telecoms, like you know that SIM cards can be identified with IMSI or ICCID. Like these are some key identities that you get to identify SIM cards when you connect them to the network. So first of all, you go to the service provider and then say that you want access to this particular exposure, and then provide your company identity, like maybe a tax ID or let's say any other corporate identity that you have. You provide that, and then you subscribe to a specific plan. You receive the SIM cards pretty much by email or like the mail service. Then you receive access to this API portal that I showed before. So you need some credentials to access the API. So you get them over email, and now you take the SIM cards, insert into your devices, and you have connected them to the network. And hereafter, like you can basically access the SIM cards, first of all, by activating the API credentials. And after that, you can take these APIs and then integrate with your infrastructure that you have. So just some screenshots of like how does a connectivity management platform look like. So as you see here, like there are SIM cards on the left. Like, I mean, we purchase, let's say, maybe 5 SIM cards from a specific operator. I'm not telling the names of the operator out, but maybe I can tell you like from which countries we actually purchase these SIM cards. So you see here, like there are 2 different screenshots. So one is from another operator and then the other one from another operator. So we can actually see the IMSI of the SIM card, then how much data it has, how much data it's consumed, and whether is this SIM card actually online or basically offline. So we can purchase data for this SIM card. We can add extra volumes or like SMS, or maybe create API users or like developers. Like we can create multiple API users and then developers for this one. I mean, apart from this, then there is service APIs. Like it's just like plain APIs that you see in any kind of like Swagger interface. So first of all, to use the API, you should be authenticated and authorized, which means you need to have some credentials. So these are like provided by the operator when you purchase the, like the API access. Then you might be wondering, like for what actually I need these APIs. So you could actually use these APIs to query the GPS information of your device. Or let's say you could use to send direct messages to the devices, like any kind of videos, or you want to send some kind of like configuration messages to the devices. But to do all this, like we need to have some kind of a service level agreement between the industry and the operator. Like once this is agreed, then the industry like basically can control. The industry can basically control, let's say, do a lot of like device IP address management. It can control the roaming policies for the device. It can increase the data rate for the device or bandwidth, or let's say it's also set sleep modes for the device. Besides this, there are like admin control functions such as like billing or data plane management, or you could update the credentials of the SIM card as well. Just a screenshot of another, like how service APIs actually look like. Like you have a device inside a SIM card, or you can actually delete a SIM card. You can obtain the details of the SIM card. So you can do pretty much a lot of different things just by using the APIs. You can query the information of the SIM card, which was never possible until now. And this is something only possible with 4G and 5G networks. So just to summarize again, the whole picture, like how it looks like, you have service APIs, plus you have IoT connectivity management platforms, which is nothing but a web interface to, let's say, to configure and then control the SIM cards. Then a lot of service APIs, and then to access information about the SIM cards itself. Well, we also have to talk about security when it comes to using the APIs. So, well, standard security measures like authentication, authorization, then using OAuth for these APIs is something mandatory that what the 3GPP standard recommends. Then, of course, like you need to maintain the privacy of the SIM cards once the information of the SIM cards is exposed in the APIs. So I will go through all of this, but besides these standard security measures, there are rate limiting or let's say logging and monitoring features, which usually come with APIs. When you, let's say, when you subscribe to APIs and then, or the API servers, they usually come with these kind of services. I give you one more example, like how the API actually works, like in general, like just going a bit more detail. So there's an API user from a company who already have access, and then they try to establish a TLS session with the API server. Then following, they send the credentials, username, password that was received in the email. Then following that, they receive a token, depending on if there is an OAuth security mechanism. So using the token, you just send a specific API request. For example, here, you see that device connectivity and location status. So you want to send the IMSI of the device, and then you want to get back where is the exact location of the device. So as you see that the information in the API response, you see that there's the information of the SIM card itself, like ICC ID, IMSI, what is the phone number, then which organization ID, or like which company actually owns this SIM card. Then some more internals of the core network are also provided inside this API response. So this is just a little bit of information that I pasted here, but there can be pretty much a lot of information about the core network itself. We can actually call it like overexposure of data. Sometimes like you leak extra information which is not supposed to be leaked, such as internals of a core network. So maybe some more screenshots of like how it actually looks in reality, like how when we query the location of the SIM card. So we also get the ID or like the IP address of the device that is holding the SIM card, plus a bunch of other internal communication that's actually going on. Okay, so besides just getting the location, you can also send direct messages to the devices. So which means you can send a downlink message. It could be either an SMS or a traditional IP message that you can actually send to the device. So as you see here, I mean, I think it's a screenshot of like sending a downlink message. So beyond that, there is also a next level thing which you could actually do, which is like uploading a key. Like usually SIM card has a master key. Every SIM card has a master key, and it's a unique master key. And here, the feature is that using the APIs, you can actually post a new master key to the operator's network. So operator will actually accept this new master key and then update it remotely over the SIM card as well. So once this is done, there is a complete change of the security, let's say, because you're changing the master key. So obviously the rest of the keys that are derived from the master key will basically change. And this is one of the features that we also tried. And then I will talk you through what kind of vulnerabilities like we actually found in these features and then how we exploited. So for that, like, I just want to give you how the attack model in this kind of situation looks like. Maybe you heard of the attack model over the radio interface. There is a passive one, then there's an active one. Like you have to passively sniff the network or actively transmit something over the radio network. But an attack model like this, it's basically you need to have, first of all, a business relationship with the operator, like, or someone who is actually providing this exposure. Maybe it's like getting access to a certain cloud, like a cloud provider as well. So that's why I said it could be an external, like someone who is trying to get a relationship with the provider. So which means like having a business relationship. Or it could be an insider, like the API developer, somebody who actually developed those APIs, or like a malicious developer. Because once you have the business relationship, like you're actually part of the cloud. So this cloud maybe holds different industries. Like it could also hold Amazon. It could also hold Honeywell. Like it could hold maybe like many other industries also part of this cloud, and then they access the APIs as well. So the attacker is basically part of the whole cloud. So getting there itself is one of the first, let's say, is a major success, because after that, it's nothing but tinkering with the APIs and then seeing if you can find vulnerabilities and then like that. So you have the credentials because once you set up a business relationship, like you get, let's say the username password to actually access these APIs. So once you have this, I think the privileges are nothing but you need to have API knowledge. I think it's not that difficult. Then you need to have internet to access these APIs, and this could be done remotely, or you could use a VPN or like Tor or whatever. Like, I mean, it's up to the capability of the attacker. Then the goals here would be to obtain access to arbitrary IoT devices. Let's say I know there's a company like which I want to target, and then they have, let's say, cloud access or like API access to a certain provider. So I would also buy access to with the same provider, and then try to access APIs and see if I can actually access the devices of my target industry. Like, can I actually find some API vulnerabilities and then try to target those particular devices. So in basically, that's one goal. Then the remaining goals would be to compromise this API server that you're seeing here and see that this is directly connected to the 4G or 5G core network. So once I compromise this API server, my next target would be like, can I actually penetrate into the 4G or 5G core network, which was so far like quite difficult because SS7 or Diameter are the only interfaces like that were open, not open, but like were kind of like trusted interfaces or closed in between only the operators. But these kind of interfaces open up to public over the internet, and the kind of threat, it's quite big because anybody in the room can be an attacker because you just need to, let's say, obtain SIM cards and then or the API access. I mean, so we started looking into this particular network exposure commercially, and then some of the questions that come with us, or like come to us, when we know that, okay, it's full of APIs and it's API security. So some of the questions that come to mind is like, are the standard security mechanisms that I actually showed you, are they sufficient, like enough to protect core networks from any kind of attacks? Or we know that like APIs use firewalls. Are they enough? Are they sufficient? Are they like follow security by design principles? Like, can they prevent many type of attacks? And we also know that like these API servers that you saw before commercially, maybe not all of them thoroughly tested. So maybe some might use just some security scanners or automated testing principles, and then nobody knows like what kind of bugs are involved in this. And most of these platforms are quite new. So I would say developed after 2019 or like 2020 or 2021. So during this period. So what happens in this case is like an insecure API will actually give you access to the API server, first of all, and then the customer data, which is hosted on that API server. Plus, you also capture the core network and the underlying IoT devices that are connected to that mobile network. So what we did, we made business relationships with so many operators, let's say 9 or 10 of them, and then try to obtain SIM cards. And we particularly, like I was located in Germany back then. So this was during the COVID time. So I was, even though like not going to the office, I was quite occupied with all this stuff. So obtaining the SIM cards was itself a bit of hassle because they need to ship physically. So there was quite of a delay, and then, but still like we managed to get them. So some operators are from Germany, and some of them are actually from US, and some of them from Israel. So we try to cover different operators so that we get to see different implementations. Maybe people have different security policies because it's not just about the company, but it's also about the government that is located in the country, and that's also able to, let's say, direct how the 5G security should look like. So we have the SIM cards, which means like we also have access to the service APIs, and each operator provides maybe up to 400 or 500 different APIs to cover different applications. So here is just a simple summary of like, what are the basic security mechanisms that they have? Like some of them don't do authentication, so they just give you a token to access the APIs. Then some of them, of course, follow OAuth with the standard mechanisms and then use TLS. And most of the platforms are actually hosted on these clouds. So, and some of them are like virtual operators. Some of them are nothing but platform providers. So we started analyzing these platforms, first of all, to find vulnerabilities in API configuration or input validation. So I think these are the classic attacks that people are aware if you're in API security, and see if we can break the authentication or access control, or when it comes to encryption, like can we use only plain HTTP-based APIs. So like I said, there are like so many hundreds of APIs, and it's really intensive, or like it's huge work to go through all the APIs. So we have to pick certain APIs, and these APIs should have like a bigger impact. So such as we pick these APIs such as like where we can exchange SMS or IP data with devices, or like location retrieval APIs, or other APIs such as like they can update configurations in the core network. Like we can switch off another device by just tuning its sleep modes using the APIs. Like we can set a sleep mode to a bunch of IoT devices and then put them to sleep. And these devices like don't belong to us. So that's some of the functions like we were targeting. And then, well, of course, there is money as well. Like, can we tinker with the billing procedures? Because now billing procedures were always like inside the core network, but now they're actually exposed outside, which means like others can also control some parts of the billing. So can we like reset some of the billing or like charging counters? Or the interesting one is also like, can we upload a new master key into the network? So it's basically, if I find a vulnerability in the API, which I can update a master key of a particular SIM card that I'm actually targeting. And then, well, I mean, if you're looking at API security, there are like plenty of resources, I think, from OWASP. How do you actually test some of these APIs? There are like some other tools like Burp, Zap, or let's say some other tools that we actually developed. But something that was quite challenging was, because all the API security that you see in the market or existing so far, they are pretty much tied to, I mean, they're not customized, or like the tools or the research that you see has nothing to do with telecom applications, because these APIs are quite new into the telecom industry, and the attacks or the threat models that apply to telecom industry are not actually existing anywhere. So it took for us quite a bit of challenge, like to find specific API parameters that we can actually target or modify the tools. For example, like Burp Suite, I mean, you cannot just plug and play. You need a lot of extensive efforts to modify the APIs and then tinker with them and see if we can find vulnerabilities in this one. Because I said that we have business relationship with the operators, or like from where we actually got the SIM card, so we are using legitimate IDs to register with them. So we have to be quite ethical when we do. So we don't really bombard the platform with a lot of API requests. So we try to be responsible and only tinker with the APIs that we have, so that we don't mess with, we know that there are like thousands of devices hosted on the platform. You can basically see that. So we don't want to mess with all of them, and then try to be more intelligent while doing this kind of a testing, rather than just some random penetration or like fuzzing. One of the first, I would say, vulnerability or kind of a weakness that we figured out was getting access to the platform. Like I said, getting access to the platform itself is quite a big issue as well. So most of the SIM cards that you can actually receive are by basically registering your company with your tax ID. So you could basically forge any company's tax ID, because this information is not secret, and you can basically get it online. And you can spoof somebody's email address and try to register, or like forge a company and then register for the API access on that company name. So with this, first of all, like you're on the platform, you get access to the APIs, but hereafter, like it's basically you are destroying the reputation of some other company. Let's say this company doesn't have a business relationship with the provider that you're registering, so you are forging someone else and then trying to get access. And so some of the common API weaknesses that we found in this platform, I would call Matteo to present that. Yeah.
Thank you, Altaf, for the introduction. So I will showcase a bit the more web-related vulnerabilities that we found actually in the APIs. So first thing first, passwords, of course, because passwords are the keys to kingdom. So they are used both to get access to the management interfaces and also to interact with some of the APIs. So what we found was that frequently the password creation, their update and management was not compliant with the GSMA guidelines. In fact, weak passwords such as root, admin, password 123 were frequently allowed. And only a few of the operators would actually check the entered password against weak passwords list, and they would reject the creation of an account with such a password. The issue is this control was still not applied when you would update a password. So you could create an account with a strong password and then change it to a weak password. This could be done by an attacker, for instance, by hijacking the account, and it's definitely an issue. So the fix in this case is to comply with the best password practices, either by following the GSMA guidelines or the OWASP or other entities, which are plenty out there. Second thing is token management. So as Altaf said, 5G and the service-based architecture relies heavily on OAuth 2 as authentication mechanism based on JWT tokens. The issue in this case was that OAuth was not really used on many of the actual API platforms and the IoT exposure platforms. Those who used OAuth and JWT token would in fact have a very high and very long expiry time, like 24 hours to 1 week, which is a lot for an IoT device. And some of them would even use a static token, which should have been revoked after each API call, but this was not the case. And one of them even brought it further by using a single static API token, which was not revocable and was shared across all devices. So that's definitely an issue because an attacker could just steal the device, read the configuration, have the API token and interact with the whole backend just by using that token. So the fix is just to follow the 3GPP guidelines and using OAuth and JSON Web Tokens for authorization and implementing custom and short validity periods for the type of IoT use case. Rate limiting is something super important for API requests. This was also to not to exhaust the resource of resource-intensive operations, but also to prevent brute force and another issue in this case. So only 2 platforms had actually in place some rate limits for the API's request. And we tested this by sending 400 valid GET and POST requests in a short period of time, using the same IP address and then using the same account. What we've seen was that no backup period or IP ban was issued for either the account or the IP for all requests. Interestingly enough, some providers would specify in their documentation the presence of rate limiting capabilities, but these were not actually implemented, so we could still do brute forcing and other kind of attacks. Yet another is verbose error messages. While this might not usually be much of an interest because they could disclose the backend and something, we could, relying just on error messages, we could probe the IMSI, the ICCID, and the IMA. So we could actually figure out if an IMSI would exist or it wouldn't. In this case, this is a problem because knowing the IMSI of other subscriber could lead to further attacks, which are not more directly on the core network, but are actually attacking an end user, so an even higher degree of criticality. The fix for this is to implement generic error messages like unauthorized, internal server error, and whatever, not disclose any information to the end user. Script injection was another common thing. We've been successful in 6 platforms out of the 10 we tested, and this is because many APIs would simply accept whatever string you will send them. So we could send SQL commands and full scripts like the cross-site scripting you see here. There would usually be on the web portal and management interface, there will be a check there for dangerous characters and scripts, but this would not happen if you would send the same request and the same update request via the API. So we could, in fact, inject cross-site scripting via the API and then triggered it by browsing the web management interface. Thus, we had stored cross-site scripting with all the downfalls of such vulnerabilities. a strict input sanitization for each and every parameter should be used in this case to avoid this type of attacks. Again, as Altaf portrayed, APIs and exposure platforms are very complex systems, so it's easy to do misconfigurations. And they are so complex that some of the operators would even allow you to create your own private networks just by using the APIs. You do realize that if this is the case, it's easy to get something wrong, and access control is the victim in this case. So we found there were some discrepancies between some API documentation and the actual software implementation. So admin-only API function like sending binary data and updating billing information were made available to the standard API user. Plus, even more, as you can see from the screenshot, there were some restricted profiles which are meant to be given to user to test out the platform, but they were not restricted. They were not restricted at all. And in fact, with the restricted user, we will still manage to get some sensitive information like the GGSN and the SGSN address of the specific gateway. Finally, almost all the APIs had a web application firewall in front of them because of the added layer of protection, and still we could, relying on the errors, both from the firewall and the actual APIs, we could still fingerprint all the tech stack used. So like in this screenshot, you can see we could find that it was using Couchbase or JBoss or other typical web framework to provide the API services. So yes, the web application firewall should be a security measure, but frequently its own errors would even disclose some interesting information. Finally, also the firewalls would overlook the detecting injection on specific user-controlled parameters because it considered parameters such as the IMSI, the ICCID as trusted, while as you could send a request, even via curl command, you could modify them. So this is very bad because as all web technologies, you should never trust user input. So this is one thing. Plus, it was also, we've seen that these security settings were inconsistent. As I was saying before, we could inject script via APIs and then trigger them on the web portal, but the opposite was also true. So with this, I conclude. I leave the stage back to Altaf, who will talk to you more about the exploits that we did and the telco-related vulnerabilities.
Okay, so I'm going to wrap up a bit quicker, but still, if you are interested in specific vulnerabilities like that I'm going to show, just catch me up after the talk. So some of the classic telco attacks that we actually tried as well. So from the devices like that we have, the IoT devices, we try to like scan the network and see if we can find any exposed devices. So we did that, and then we could, in one of the operators, like we could find some of the their production devices that are actually exposed. So and then we could attempt to log in, but this is an operator that we are closely associated. So I cannot talk more about that. But besides, like I said, in the platforms or in the APIs, one of the major issue was with using permanent identifiers or the private identifiers of the SIM cards. So you can basically, I mean, first of all, like this will, like you want to get data of some device. So you basically have to insert an IMEI or IMSI in the API and then send the request. So this will basically allow or like encourage anyone to do enumeration, because the IMSIs or the ICCIDs are like some kind of standard numbers that you can basically guess out of the platform. So like I said, if you are part of the platform, you get access, you get some SIM cards, and then you can, let's say, guess what is the IMSI of your target, let's say the provider, or like the target customer that you are looking for. Okay. Another big vulnerability was we were able to send IP messages, or it doesn't have to be IP messages, but any kind of like random messages to arbitrary devices that are connected to the same platform. So we found an issue with the authorization, like while sending an IP message, so there was no proper authorization check that was done, which actually allowed us to ping a lot of devices that are connected to, or like that belong to another industry. Not just ping, but we could also do port scan on these devices, and then a lot of other attacks that could also be done. But we restrained like not to do such attacks, because like we wanted to, first of all, like inform inform the operator or like about this issue so that they could get rid of it, because this would be the extent of it. Like once you can capture the IoT devices of someone else, like, I mean, that's the end of the, let's say, the whole story. Besides that, we also found some very, very interesting issues in other providers, such as the private details, such as, I mean, everybody knows that SIM card has a PIN, it has a PUC, or besides that, there are also like billing details and so on. So the issue was, like I said, you can actually use the API to send an SMS to the device. And I don't know how many of you are actually aware of something called webhook. Webhook is like a place where you, in the API, is like you can issue a URL to the webhook, and then it would update real-time information about the API traffic that is going on. So like, so we inserted a URL into the webhook. So, and then whenever we send an SMS, we programmed in such a way that, okay, we would like to get back a response. Like an SMS is sent, and then we want to have a response that SMS was delivered or it was not delivered. So this was some kind of a practice that we were following. But what we saw that in this SMS response, not only we receive the SMS was delivered, but there was extra information, not even extra, but like over extra information that was being sent back to the attacker. So so it's basically the details, internal details of the SIM card, like the PIN, PUC, plus some of the key information is what is the industry name, organization ID, like which is what are the core network entities that this particular devices are connected to. Like pretty much a lot of information is actually present or like leaked to the attacker. I mean, this is a serious issue because it just really shouldn't be like that. And I mean, when we communicated this to the operators or like the vendors, they said that it was particularly requested by one of their customers. But what happens is like, they try to apply such a request from a specific customer, they generically apply to everyone. Because until we investigated, like we couldn't find this issue. So it actually affects all the users of the platform, and they are unaware of it, because unless you test it, you don't know that something is like this. Then another interesting thing we tried to see was like, can we spread malware through the mobile network? So we try to insert a very known popular malware into the SMS and then send it to the IoT devices that we have. What happens is like, what we expect is that because this is a quite known popular malware, we expect that operator would actually filter it and then don't send this to the device. But we see that like none of the operators, or like 10 of them we tested, like don't really care about what's there in the content, and then they deliver it to the device. And when we conveyed this to some operators, like some of them they said, was that some countries don't actually allow to investigate or to look into the SMS content or like IP content, but some they do, but they don't care about what is inside the content. I mean, when we go to different conferences, like we see different companies like boasting about they have this kind of feature or they detect this kind of malware, but when we test them in reality, we don't really see these features being used, or not sure, maybe they have it, but they don't activate them. Then coming with the XSS protection. I mean, I think everybody knows this kind of attacks. So still observing them in 5G platforms, it's quite like not really a nice thing, because these attacks are something easily they can be done. I mean, you don't really need to learn a lot to pull out like an XSS attack. And we were able to successfully inject code into many platforms, and one of them we could actually execute it so that we could read some of the internals of the platform or the API server, let's say. Okay, so these are some of the issues that we actually found in some of the latest IoT platforms. We did try to get SIM cards in India as well, but I think I was physically not present here, so it was difficult to get SIM cards and then try out these attacks in India as well. So we focused much of them in Europe and USA as well. So just to summarize, we see that OAuth and then TLS, though it is a standard recommended practice, not really widely practiced. Then only 2 of like 9 platforms that we tested are actually affected with the serious vulnerabilities that you saw here. Then lack of rate limits and then strong password policies are like quite seen everywhere. Script injection is also like a big issue that we found in many platforms. Then besides not inspecting SMS or IP content, even though it has a malware, is already like an issue in the whole, in many platforms. Yes, we did inform all the vendors, and then also we went through the GSMA as well to see if we can reach out to more operators. So this was successfully received, or like well received, I would say, because this is already a quite new research, or like the API research, and I think it can actually set some kind of standards in the telco industry, like how not to configure the APIs. Okay, so some key takeaways is that definitely like 5G security is much better than 4G or what 3G, 2G offer as well. But given that these closed networks are now shifting towards like commoditized hardware, such as using clouds or APIs, I think this makes it more attractive for the attacker and then tries to pull more adversaries to attack mobile networks. So I think it's more important to consider like security as a higher priority and then like use more resources or tools to make security, I think, more like a higher priority in mobile networks. Like I said, one single API, insecure API, can actually allow like attackers to take over the IoT devices and also the whole network as well. And firewalls, like we saw, most of them had firewalls, but they didn't really help or detect simple injection attacks. So what are we talking about like then? Security by design is something I think it should be an essential or like a fundamental practice that most of them should follow. Actually, this research maybe could actually open up to something called Telecom API Top 10, because I think everybody saw that OWASP API Top 10, but Telecom API Top 10 is something that will come out in some years, I would say. So it definitely will help operators and then anybody like who is willing to use 5G networks to actually understand what are the risks that actually come with APIs in telecom. With this, I conclude the talk, and then if you have some questions, comments, I mean, I'm sorry, like we crossed the time limit a bit, but if you have some questions, please shoot.
Anyone question?
Hey, so you said you can update the private key or the master key of a SIM, right? So what would be the attack path if I could have that capability?
The attack path would be like, I mean, once you have, so you know your target, let's say, you just need to find out the INSI of the target and then use the insecure API and update the key. So once this is done, the operator will take care of updating the key on the SIM card. This is done remotely. And hereafter, like you basically can listen to any kind of conversation that this SIM card is making hereafter, because you know like the keys, and then maybe you need some extra material such as like authentication parameters or something. So hereafter you have the master key. You can basically derive all the subsequent session keys to just listen to any conversation or decode any SMS that you have, or like if you're looking for a specific target.
Yeah. First of all, a very great talk. I really enjoyed that. So my question is, so I checked that you exploited the XSS in the management platform for arbitrary script execution, right? So, but I didn't understand the code execution part. Can we also achieve arbitrary code execution?
Yes. Yeah.
How?
It's basically like when we try to inject a specific in a specific parameter. I mean, I think I'm not showing the exact parameter because it's different for different. Let's say it's different for different operator, because the APIs are different for different operators. So generically, like we could target something called alias. Alias is a parameter that it's like a pseudo name that is given to be used instead of IMSI or IMEI. So in many platforms, we found that alias is a parameter we can inject, and then this is basically stored inside the platform hereafter. Along with this one, if you can pull out the authorization vulnerability that I showed before while sending the IP address, like, I mean, there was no authorization check. So when you combine both of them, you can actually execute directly on the server, or you can inject this and then let your like the target customer, the target industry, let's say, once they open this one, because it's basically stored inside the server. So once they open a web interface like this, you can execute code directly on someone else's interface.
Anyone else?
Hello. To start off with, I really enjoyed your talk. Cheers to that. I notice that the very basic point to actually perform this kind of assessment is to actually build a business relationship, as you mentioned.
Can you be a bit louder, please?
Am I audible now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I noticed was that the very base point, as in the first thing, a prerequisite to perform this kind of assessment, is to have a relationship with the service provider, as you mentioned. So how easy or difficult was it in your case to actually get access to those service providers? Once you had got access to the SIM cards, IoT SIM cards, the next step, how easy or difficult was it?
Yeah, like I said, getting the access, because you need to buy the SIM card, which costs like maybe $15 or something, not that big. But the funny part was like, because like I said, this procedure of buying the SIM cards, you have to submit your tax ID or your company certificate, like a basic one, corporate ID. And then after that, it's quite easy. Like they would directly ship the SIM cards, because I think these procedures are not hardened yet. Like for example, you go to your shop by yourself and then you submit your, you want to buy a SIM card like Airtel or Jio. So they will take you and then check your ID. And like I think, I don't say strict, but there is sufficient verification procedure in this case. But in the SIM cards that we obtained, it was basically online. Like you just have to submit all the documents online. Maybe they verify or they may not verify, and then after that, the SIM cards will be shipped to the address that you gave. The funny part is like, because I'm from the university, like we always used our university ID or something, to buy the SIM cards. But during COVID time, like nobody was going to the university. We were staying home, and then we always used our private addresses to ship the SIM cards. So which means that in this case, if you forge some tax ID and then provide some random address, you can basically obtain SIM cards on somebody else's name or somebody on a different company's name. I mean, you can basically take any company name, and then some tax ID is something like a public information that's available in Europe, I guess here as well. So it was quite easy, but after that, then studying the APIs a little bit, understanding what you can do with that, plus some API knowledge with the tools and all this stuff. Like I think I don't say like it was quite difficult. Like that's why I'm telling like it's not that difficult, but it took a lot of time to look into 9 platforms and see how each of them configure and then differently. So.
All right, awesome. Thanks for the answer. And lastly, all the testing was performed in the European region, right?
Europe and USA and Middle East as well.
Awesome. All right, thank you.
Just as an addition, the easiness in getting the SIM cards was probably due to the fact that the operators were launching this new service, so they were quite eager to get as many new customers as possible. So that's why it's currently probably not a hardened procedure. So that's it.
Yeah, one question. How can we sniff the 5G communication?
Sorry?
How can we sniff the 5G communication?
How can you sniff the 5G token?
Communication. Yeah.
Okay, this is maybe, I mean, we will have a talk on this in 2023 maybe. But okay, you're saying like how to sniff 5G communication, like
Yes, exactly.
same as 4G, because on the radio side there hasn't been much change. But I mean, of course, like 5G uses a different physical layer compared to 4G. You might just need a different SDR, like same SDR, but with a different software to sniff the whole 5G communication.
Okay.
But the problem is like it could be completely encrypted, or even the IMSI. I don't know if you read a bit of 5G, you will already learn that there is something called SUCHI, an encrypted IMSI. So this makes it a little bit difficult on the radio side. But the thing is like, the other parts are getting much easier, like not easier, but more interesting. For example, like the APIs.
Yeah.
I know the radio part, like I did a lot of things there, but now also like makes me boring that, I mean, I cannot sit there for a long time. I need to explore different parts. So that's why we took from another direction, like from the other side of the network. But intercepting 5G communication, maybe you could still use 2G network as well. I mean, this is a classic technique that many devices use, or like many interception systems use. Yeah.
In such cases, like how we can access the API from the 4G direct access?
Like I said,
5G,
you need to have a contract with the provider. Like, I mean,
Okay.
you could individually, I think it's difficult because it already raises a suspicion like why you need SIM cards. Like you don't have an infrastructure.
Yeah.
They would maybe feel more comfortable Maybe you can ask some Airtel guys or like, some other operator guys like
For
to
accessing
let
this
you,
API
to
service
give you a bunch of
provider,
SIM cards and then you can play with them. Like,
okay, okay.
but I
For
don't think it will work.
accessing this API, I think doesn't require the SIM cards.
Sorry, can you repeat?
What I'm saying, like without SIM cards, we access these APIs. Am I correct?
Yes, it's also possible because all of these APIs are publicly, like because they want to show, all the operators want to market their platform. Like they show a basic look of their API. And most of them you know what is inside the API, but to use them, you need some kind of credential.
Yeah.
Maybe you can break the authentication. That's the quite simplest way. If you do that, then yeah, you don't need any kind of business contract. Then you're on the platform, and yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.